The venture capitalist Peter Thiel is seen by many as this shadowy puppet master that is connected behind the scenes to so many people. He first made serious money as part of the so-called PayPal mafia with Elon Musk and Reid Hoffman. He was then an early investor in Facebook and one of the founders of Palantir, a highly controversial company that does big data analysis and surveillance for governments and corporations. Politically, he wrote The Diversity Myth with David Sacks as a right-wing libertarian back in the 1990s. He also wrote the foreword to a very controversial book, The Sovereign Individual, that predicts the downfall of democratic nation-states. And he was an early supporter of Donald Trump back in 2016, and more recently, a key supporter of J.D. Vance, Trump's running mate for the 2024 presidential election. He's quite clearly a very well-connected, economically right-wing libertarian. So it's quite interesting that for the last decade or so, he keeps on highlighting a truth about how capitalism really works that I think completely undermines a key libertarian argument.
So as a founder, as an entrepreneur, you're always aiming for monopoly. The Wall Street Journal excerpted the chapter in my book, All Happy Companies Are Different. It sort of gets to, they sort of retitled it as Competition is for Losers, which is this sort of has a much punchier ring to it. Competition is for losers, or, capitalism and competition. People always say they're synonyms. I think they're antonyms because, if you have perfect competition, you compete away all the capital. If you want to have Darwinian competition bared red in tooth and claw, you should open a restaurant. It's like an awful, awful business. You will never make any money. It's perfectly competitive and completely non-capitalist. And so from the inside, you want to always go for something like monopoly.
Real capitalists do their utmost to avoid competition, as the authors of Choke Point Capitalism put it. While competition is supposed to be central to capitalism, the wealthiest people alive today have gotten rich by suppressing it. Successful capitalists have always been seeking moats or monopolies that shelter them from the ravages of competition in the free market.
Charlie and I try and distinguish between businesses where you have to have been smart once and businesses where you have to stay smart. If you had a big network of television affiliate station 30 years ago, you could be a terrible manager and make a fortune, basically, because the one decision to own the network TV affiliate overcame almost any deficiency that existed from that point forward.
And for just as long, critics such as Noam Chomsky have been highlighting the gap between the rhetoric and reality of capitalism.
And the principle of really existing free market theory is free markets are fine for you, but not for me.
And this is more than just a double standard being applied by those in power. It completely undermines a key argument libertarians make for why government regulations are not necessary. The widespread belief in the basic narratives around free markets is not just built on recurring tropes comparing Western successes to communism's failings, but also on a deep intuitive analogy with evolutionary survival of the fittest, which makes it easy to believe that the harsh competition within markets will lead to a creative flourishing of our economy, just like in a natural ecology. But then libertarians add to this, arguing that all government regulations get in the way of this natural flourishing of competitive market economies. See, for example, this quote from Johan Norberg in his book, The Capitalist Manifesto. Free pricing and profit opportunities act as the economy's GPS, describing the landscape and showing how you navigate to the place you want to be. This is one reason why regulations are always problematic, even those that are necessary, for example, to maintain safety or environmental protection. In other words, he's arguing that all government regulation distorts the market, removing useful information from the participants of the market, thereby hindering the ability of our competitive economy to work out how to best grow and thrive. So, regulations make society poorer than it could have been, and in the end, that's bad for everyone. And, Norberg argues, We don't even need these regulations to manage the problem of there being some bad actors in the market, because competition does this job for us already. I know that some will be tempted to lie and deceive, and I know perfectly well there are thieves and bandits hiding among the companies. That is why we must have free markets. Had we always been able to rely solely on their goodwill, we would have offered them monopoly power and tariff protection. It is precisely because we cannot count on their goodwill that we need to control them with free competition and consumer choice, as well as an independent legal system and free media. Capitalism is our way to keep capitalists under our control. And notice that Norberg here is essentially using capitalism and competition as synonyms. But
competition is for losers.
And, of course, it's not just Norberg who still argues that market competition is the crucial mechanism to keep companies honest and accountable in what they're doing. Just listen to Friedberg and Chamath on the All In podcast, the beating heart of venture capital narratives today, talking about what's going wrong in the aerospace industry.
And I think that this plays out not just with this company, but obviously also with Boeing, and the fact that we've narrowed down the competitive market space to just a few sole source providers that have very little accountability, and eventually these sorts of conditions arise. Either prices get too high, quality degrades, all the other things that natural market forces would keep a check on.
This is a company that's rotting because there is no accountability. And the reason there's no accountability is there's no real functional competition. And I have not seen any good answer to accountability other than competition.
But what was that again?
Competition is for losers.
So what's my point? Well, look, I agree that healthy market competition in certain sectors is clearly a very powerful force to keep companies delivering something useful to society. But it is only government regulation that can ensure that these healthy competitive conditions remain in place. For example, that's exactly what the antitrust laws are there for. And we know governments have to do this because, as we've seen, the honest capitalists tell us that left to their own devices, capitalists will do everything they can to avoid competition, to build and maintain a moat or monopoly that protects them from competition and enables them to make huge profits. And the evidence surrounds us that capitalists regularly succeed in building monopolies and monopsonies. Choke point capitalism is full of examples. So then, you can't appeal to market competition, as Norberg does, to do the job of regulating the behavior of bad actors in these markets. Without functional competition, it is then only governments who can hold those companies to account. Even Milton Friedman, a key proponent of libertarianism, recognized this point. The choice between the evils of private monopoly, and public regulation cannot, however, be made once and for all, independently of the factual circumstances. If the technical monopoly is of a service or commodity that is regarded as essential, and if its monopoly power is sizable, even the short-run effects of private, unregulated monopoly may not be tolerable, and either public regulation or ownership may be a lesser evil. So, while libertarians use the disciplining force of market competition as a key part of their argument against the need for any government regulation, in reality, you either need regulation to ensure there is healthy market competition, or in other markets, you need regulation precisely because there is no functional competition. Now, of course, there are plenty of bad regulations. There's regulatory capture and straight-out corrupt regulation. There's also well-intentioned regulation that leads to absurd outcomes, like the story Ezra Klein recalls of the toilet in a park in San Francisco that was going to cost $1.7 million to install. Just a ridiculous outcome that I imagine no one is in favor of. As far as I can tell, everyone agrees that bad regulations should be removed. Everyone agrees that regulations should be simplified and deleted when outdated. That's obvious, but it's a long way from the idea that all government regulations are problematic, as I quoted Norberg saying earlier. Rather, I think everyone should be recognizing that some appropriate level of regulation is almost always necessary to have a functioning, healthy market economy. What we need are ongoing, nuanced, sector-by-sector discussions about what level and style of regulation would be best for each market. And to hold the regulators to account, we have to use our democratic processes. Which is why I agree with Martin Wolf, who characterizes capitalism and democracy as symbiotic twins that both champion individual freedom and agency, and that work best when in a healthy balance. There are two main ways in which this delicate balance between politics and market can be destroyed: state control over the economy and capitalist control over the state. Absolutely. And if capitalists think that competition is for losers, then they can't also complain when governments regulate their monopoly behaviors. But what do you think about this gap between the libertarian narrative and really existing capitalism? Please do continue the discussion in the comments below and subscribe for more videos like this. Thank you for watching.